Thank you all. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am honored and happy to be here in Nairobi. I live in Kampala and sometimes in Atlanta, Georgia, in the States. And I am so privileged to be friends with Xenson Zinja here. We have known each other for about 20 years, so it's quite a while. So I'd like to sort of flow across us, this divide that has a jar of water, but also include you in the conversation. I think if we're going to have a conversation, it should be among us and not us sitting here and talking to one another where you're waiting until the Q&A. So I'm hoping that you can jump in here and there as we go along. So with Xenson, our conversations have included talking about art, talking about performance, what constitutes art sometimes, because he delves into a range of art-making processes, some rooted in what we might call the indigenous, for example, materials, the material of bark cloth, which he uses a lot. We don't see it very much in this particular exhibition, but if you look up his past work, you will see there's an incredible use of bark cloth. We have also talked about food, for example, at his studio, which is a lovely, lovely space. If you go to Kampala, please try and go visit him at his studio. I have eaten guavas and sweet bananas from his plantation at the studio. So it's a studio space that is not only about making art, it's also making art out of food, out of the land on which he's located. So I really appreciate that about Xenson's workspace and Xenson's generosity as a human being. So for now, I keep saying Xenson, 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 but I'm going to ask him to tell us, who is Xenson?
Well, I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and I think I like to leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. We will sort of pull those threads apart bit by bit. In the meantime, I would also want to know the play across names, how we come up with names. Your mother called you Samson Senkava. You call yourself Xenson. Can you tell us that transition?
It started as a thought. Again, I think it's a long process, but to bring it forward as Zinja there are layers I was playing with, the combination of my two names. Senkava, as you can hear it, in essence means a place of mystery. So, but the X sound, at some point I went to China and met this calligraphy artist, and we talked about sounds, and especially the X sound and the Senkava. And so when I told him, I always use this Xenson thing as, originally I started off as a label, fashion, because I had started this thing way early in school. So we talked about the history of sounds in Chinese, and I found a relation of that and they had a bit of correlation with most of the sounds that we have in Uganda, especially in Uganda. And I guess that's what eventually confirmed the name as Xenson. So I just went with it, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have an interest in words, an interest in sound, but also words and sound that cross what we might call geographical boundaries. Because you're talking about Uganda, Luganda, but you're also speaking with a Chinese person and thinking through the different sounds across these different geographical regions, as well as spoken sounds. With that thinking, I would like to draw us into the title of the work before we go into talking about your performance. The title of this exhibition is Xenson, your name, and Olidemo Pipa. It's very poetic, even just the sound of it without knowing what the words mean. Can you tell us how this title comes to be for this exhibition?
again, it's a long story, but because, like most of the things I do really, first of all, childhood, some of them are memories from childhood. But Olidem Pipa is a word that my mom always used. If you were cheeky and you wanted something, she would say, I'm going to Olidem Pipa. It would either mean you're late, or you've missed out, or that trick won't work. It also depends on the context. But when only demo paper, that could mean that the trick you're trying to play on me won't work, or is not working, or something like that. But only demo paper could also mean that you've eaten in a dustbin, or kasasiro. And pipa in this context is conceptual in a way that we all know that the rich people in court use pipa they put their junk. But then pipa is also used to collect water, for instance. But it's something I've been playing around for a bit. A pipa, of course, first as a utensil, but also the other things surrounding the pipa. So when I came, eventually when I came to see the space and chatted with the curator, Don, I came to Nairobi to see the space and see how it speaks to me. And see, what could come out. So, and especially you ask this, so this piece is in this place because as we are talking with the curator, he said, maybe you could do something here. Already in my mind, I knew what I could put in this place because of the history. It is something that just came from my childhood memory. I said, I think I can work with something here. So so Olidem Pipa then became, because of the materiality that we are going to use, I thought, okay, I think this is the time to begin to think about this Pipa thing and Olidem Pipa and put context to it. There was already a bit of context, but to amplify it more. So, and I think that's how but also from my past nomenclature of my exhibitions, I like to play around with words. Like my first exhibition, probably you remember it, Kalichwale Colorful, which is written in Luganda, but it sounds English, but when you read it, it gives another context. Almost poetic, but and then there was fashion art, poetry, graffiti, all that one word, where obviously I'm trying to incorporate all the genres that I engage in, the poetry, the fashion, but I look at it as one thing instead of all these things. So I guess, Olidem Pipa then became, Yeah.
So I am also interested in two things around the pipa. You might have understood now that a pipa, which is spoken in Luganda, is really the barrels, the steel barrels in which oil is transported and sold, and it's a round steel barrel. And when you look at the work, you will see some words that Xenson has selected from these barrels that he's chosen to cut and highlight in the work. You'll see a word Enoch, you'll see Arabic writing of the word Enoch, you'll see total. So that gives us a little bit of context of which kind of barrels he's talking about. And they are sold as empty barrels in the markets, ready for reuse. As Xenson has spoken, it's very much used to collect rainwater from the roof of a house. It's also used as a garbage bin. And that's the part that I really would like to think through, looking in the past for some of the work you have done. You created and performed the piece at the FNB Johannesburg Art Fair. I'm trying to recall the name of that performance, but you are in a drum. It's a green, it's not really a drum, it's the plastic bin, a green plastic bin, and out come these empty cans of soda that are battered and crushed. And then someone is riding or really pulling the cart around. Then you emerge yourself from the bin. So I'm thinking through the tension of garbage in a bin and reuse of the steel drums and that idea of a pipa as a container.
Yeah, the work was Encialeta.
Encialeta,
Yeah.
yes.
So Encialeta is another, and we've been talking about this earlier, that language is always part of our culture. It informs who we are. So Encialeta is a title of a song. I mean, it's a common word, we all know it, but it became popular, I think, as a title of a song by a cousin to Jose Chameleon. Jose Chameleon is probably, and I forget the name of the artist, but he sang this song, Encialeta. Okay, no one knows. Clever J, he calls himself Clever J. So Encialeta. So this is like something came with the wind, or the world brought something that almost like an earthquake. Encialeta. So Encialeta again is a street slang, but it became part of the subconscious of the people and part of the language, the local lingo, especially on the street, cosmopolitan Kampala. So I thought this is, so when you talk of Kampala and cosmopolitanism, obviously, even Nairobi, the concept of dumping and these cans being on the street and everything, it begins to build, a story. But Encialeta deeply could also mean people of different characters, politicians especially, presidents. The world can bring this president that can become, Muluganda, we call it Akayinja Mungato, like.
Becomes a pain.
Yeah, a pain, but Akayinja Mungato, maybe you could translate.
It's
a stone in the shoe.
Yeah. It bothers you, you must take it out.
Yeah, you must take it out because it's bothering, it's giving you this. And that work also had a video installation. It was it had a spoken word, it had the performance itself, but it also had a backdrop of a video that I made a couple of years ago called Kakoko.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So again, Kakoko, I was also bringing back that memory of Kakoko was a psychedelic film that I made of a dying chick, which, and again, I was playing around with elements of reincarnation, elements of near-death experience, and I guess navigating the world is what we do on the daily. So, so I guess the vessel, the vehicle, is always part of. I think it's not without. It's always, even the world we live in is a vessel. So that concept still, I think, goes up to the pipa as a vessel. But what's also interesting is then what happens with, because I looked at these cans, getting them in South Africa was a bit of chaotic. And so I was thinking, so after these cans, and I've performed with them, what else then? So I looked at another layer that I could add. And so that layer became eventually using it as support for painting. Yeah. So when that happened again, that now inspired to look at the paper as also a material that could be utilized. And obviously when you do a bit of research and look at Kampala and the so-called Omuntu wa wansi, the average, the informal economy, again now people use a bit of paper, recycled metal to repurpose and reuse some of this. So I began to look at the processes and how as an artist, how I can reuse these processes. Sometimes you look at the actual objects, but also you see the process that these guys go through to break down the paper into the objects that they make. And obviously looking at the stories that led them to do that. So in a way, by doing that, I incorporate and of course build this narrative around the paper or the barrow. Yeah.
Thank you. So we see the barrow, your use of the barrow as a vessel, as a container evolve, looking at the garbage, looking at the humans that are actually making this garbage and how they're using these vessels and how you then pull apart the barrow, and it's no longer a vessel that contains something, but it's actually many layers. Paintings, if you all turn around, I'm not sure if you saw the work behind you. So those are some of the examples of Xenson using the barrows as canvas in a way. And then once you have walked through the exhibition, you see that's now becoming three-dimensional objects and monumental in many ways. And what I'd like to come to now is to ask if anyone was here at the opening. I'd like to talk about this multimedia way of working that you have. We have heard about the performance. We have heard about you taking apart the drums, you performing inside a garbage can. So there are multiple layers to Xenson's work. Did someone see the performance? Please, could you recount, share what you saw and how you felt about it?
Well, I think...
Your name, please, first.
My name is Achayo.
Achayo, thank you.
Yes, so I think for me it was the surprise element because Don was in mind to introduce the artist, and so we expected that somebody would come in and would hear about them, about why they do what they do, but it was something completely different, you know? So honestly, from where I was completely surprised and even stunned because it was pretty stunning. I mean, from how he dressed up and the facial mask that completely transported him to another space, another planet, you know? Yeah, I couldn't get part of what he was saying because it was in Uganda, but the energy still caught me. I think the emotion or the memory that I left with were two things. Really, one is that he's pretty an intriguing person, you know? So I was like, I want to delve into his mind to understand his craft and his practice, you know, and his philosophy. But secondly, and more importantly, is that the moment for me, I felt a lot of tension, you know? Yeah, he really made this space very, very tense, or at least I indeed was, you know? Yes, which for me was, it was quite something. I think that's how I will choose to remember him, you know? Yeah, that he was able to take me to that place.
It transported you.
Yeah, thank you.
Xenson, could you speak to that tension that, I don't know if you're even aware, you create this tension in your audiences?
Yeah, it's not even intentional, but it's like looking at, because I also like to play around with social consciousness. I mean, I'm a social conscious person, if you might know. So, and what I was saying also is socially conscious in a way. So I think that tension is brought about by, because we take some things for granted, And as human beings, sometimes we Uganda, we are just too subtle, too relaxed to let things happen, or things pass by, or things go. So the attention first is to create attention. And this attention, again, is to now to draw in what I might say or what reaction might come through. Obviously, I was looking at this piece, and I wanted to see how the transmission of what I'm doing can also relate to the work. Because this work, even with the multicolors, it's like candy. It's like Kamasu, the other work, if you see in the corner, that you have these colors that pull you in, and then eventually grab your grasp. You know, you're into their grasp. The colors are, they seem simple and you know, it's very colorful. But when you're in, it's like candy, and then the after effects, maybe diabetes and all these other things. Maybe I can actually first talk about this work because,
Because it brings us to the structure of the exhibition.
Yeah. So, but the first idea is to try and create a correlation between what I'm doing and the work. The work is about these barrels that bring in purified or fine oil from crude oil that is essentially taken out of the continent through multinationals, because we don't have many refineries. So this, especially if you look at the history of the Delta in Nigeria, these are taken, refined, and brought back as refined, sometimes for oil, bleaching, you know, ladies, then of course, vehicles and all that. But sometimes people don't question that actually this is an African resource that has been taken and then it's resold as refined. And most people might think it's even from Europe or wherever it's refined. Of course, some of it comes from the Middle East, and that, of course we know the conflicts and all that, whatever happens in the Middle East. So, so that tension might not be seen when you see the barrel. But the good thing is, with the branding, we can actually see and know some of where these barrels come. I mean, we all know Total, and so if you were observant, you might have seen some demonstrations with Total sponsoring the Africa Cup of Nations, and in Uganda, Total sponsoring the pipeline, the pipeline that is going to go through Tanzania to the coast, taking crude oil from Uganda, near Lake Choga in Toro region. And we all know the politics that surrounds oil, the politics around oil. So, so those names you can begin to, some are there. So the juxtaposition in a way also helps build this collage. But then again, the title Mukeka comes from, there are two layers that actually inspired this work. One of them is, again, it's a riddle. Koi dia, I think the curator wrote it. Koi dia, nina mukazi wange aluka emikeeka mingi naye atuula ku ttaka. Literal English meaning could be, I have a wife, she weaves many mats but sits on the ground. Are we together? So you weave many mats, but you sit on the ground. So which inspired the concept of more even like a metaphor of Africa being a country, I mean a continent rich with resources, but we still remain a poor continent. We are a rich continent, rich with resources, but we still step broke and poor. Tuluka emikeeka mingi naye tusigala tuli ki? Tutuula ku ttaka. So that's the first, that was the first inspiration. The other, of course, again, comes from that riddle, from another riddle, which is also related to omukeeka, which is, nina mukazi wange, aluka emikeeka mingi, aluka omukeeka, teguggwaayo. Which, okay, sorry, I can go back a bit. Nina mukazi wange, aluka emikeeka mingi, atuula ku ttaka. The riddle, luggwayo nti ensujju. To solve the riddle, you say ensujju. Ensujju is pumpkin. Yeah, so if you create a picture of a pumpkin with all these leaves around it, but it can't sit on one of, because when you look at where it sits, the mark, yet it would have been protected if it had sat on one of its leaves. You get that? So that's the concept that I was playing with. Then the other one is nina mukazi wange aluka omukeeka teguggwaayo. And the answer to that riddle is oluguudo. That you have your wife that weaves this mat that is endless. So it means so that's inspired the work to look like this, that it's an endless piece that can continue. I can keep adding and adding. But also that takes us to another layer of, for how long can Africa keep giving its resources endlessly? And it might not even be just Africa, but even human beings. If you're nice to people and they're not returning the favor of the love, for how long can you keep giving this love? If we love presidents, for how long can we, if they don't give back to humanity? Because in essence, we are part of the ecosystem, the natural environment. We are just a part of that ecosystem. So, I think briefly, I moved
that's
fast.
Perfect. That's wonderful. We like all the layering that you bring into one work.
So again, that has taken us again to language, to culture, because these riddles are really, they are over 800 years. I mean, if you look at the history of Uganda, where I come from, my tribe or my nation, I hate to use the word tribe. So you can still see that they are 800 years ago, still relevant today, and they will still be relevant, I know, in the next 800 years. So it's up to me as an artist today to begin to articulate, assimilate, and then see how they can be relevant for today.
For this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the many layers you bring into this work and into this conversation. I can take one of many directions, but I'd like to start with these relationships you're talking about. We have the question of roads. The road that this wife is weaving a mat that is endless, which means roads can continue taking us from location to location, and those relationships don't have to end, which also draws us into the mat that you weave, but is endless. It doesn't have a border as a regular mat for sitting on would be. So I want to think through ideas of relationships that we're building, whether they are destructive relationships, for example, exporting raw materials and importing the finished products and thinking through how we are destroying the environment in that process, but also how it can be productive. We have a road, we have a path. So the kinds of relationships that we build, I would like to think through them in terms of monumentality. You have taken an object that we would normally have, you have a couple of people sitting down, having a conversation, and you have made it into an enormous work which dwarfs the viewer, in my perspective, and it also creates this infinity possibility. I want to think the positive side of these relationships you're building in the monumental scale.
I think it's to try and amplify for the average human the expanse of the, I wouldn't say problem, but of the challenge that we are facing. Because sometimes if you look at something that is minimal, maybe you miss the point. So the graveness of this, if I amplify, then I make it a bit positive, but also a bit accessible. Okay. But also maybe give it another dimension that people can begin to a new dialogue around it. Okay. You know, and I think basically that's. I mean, yeah, but also if you look at the history, I mean, religion, for instance, we Africans had their religion. And our religion, the indigenous expressions were really part of nature, but also they were an everyday thing. It was a prayer almost every day. It wasn't like go to church on Sunday or wherever. So and most of it was even discreet. You would go sneak out to whoever, and then get your healing or get, it was not. But then for a long time, because of obviously the Christianity and missionarism, they brought us the concept of monumentality. Mm-hmm. How? Monumental also starts with, for instance, the big stories that we hear about, for instance, in the Bible. You just feel like, and then you go to the churches. I mean, if you've gone to cathedrals, entering a cathedral itself makes you feel like you're in the presence of God Himself, So
why is that?
Yeah, because if someone wants to control you, he needs to create something that you already feel inferior. You feel small. When you go in a church, in a huge cathedral, you already feel small. The only thing you can do is humble yourself.
Because of the expanse of the architecture. The expanse
of the architecture, you already feel small. So and they started by building cathedrals. So if you compare your little worship with your deity or whatever, and then you go into a cathedral, you already feel this God is a bigger God.
How about the trees? The trees is the tree where you're worshiping Nakaima, for example, is enormous.
That's the point. That this is a tree that is we are part of that tree. We are part of the nature. We see this tree every day. We see the water. There is Omugachira, Nalubare.
The River Nile.
Then there is recently, Ngogeni Masaka.
Another river?
Yeah, that river.
Katonga.
I happened to see Katonga moving at one point because, and these are weird things that you might not understand, but I saw Katonga moving with all its belongings at one time when the Chinese started to dig for sand. Yes.
In the Ruela expanse that Jennifer Makumbi writes about in Chintu.
Yeah, but the trees, and why also they are in essence also worshipped. They are part of nature. They are part of us. So we don't feel like it's an alien thing. It's a new thing. We don't need to recreate it. We just know Nakaima. And then the church is a man-made thing. and it's built to draft your thinking, you know? So, and I think that's where the gist for me is. So in a way, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm trying to turn the tide. That by amplifying this, I'm also beginning I'm trying to use in the same spirit, you know, like to...
Yeah, the notion of the architecture that dwarfs you can be carried into the sculpture that dwarfs the viewer and brings the tension that Achayo was talking about, which you worked with, your wordplay, I had that there, attention and tension, playing with the words there.
But also bring the... transfer that energy to you, because we admire. And we believe. Okay. So when you see this monumental thing, then you begin to admire and believe. Okay. So it's a reverse thing that it begins to speak to you. Like people, like churches, especially cathedrals. I mean, like weddings in Uganda, people want to be wed in a cathedral because it's Lubaga, wow, for you to be wed. But you can go a lakeside, 10 people, call a chaplain or wherever, and get married. But because in their mind they have this, so I think it's playing with that. But also I think monumentality, apart from amplifying, I mean the world is vast, you know, like, so yeah, so I think that's...
It's a concept we live with, and there's always that desire for something bigger than we are. Thank you. I will ask one more question and then open it up to the public. I want to think through what David Kaiser, a Ugandan writer, said about you in 2012 in the Wazo Talking Talks. He said, "This is an artist with enormous energy and technical competence. And I'm pulling those out to draw our attention not only to the material, but your techniques of production. How is that process? Please tell us more how you work. How do you make this work?"
Yeah, but that's simple. It's what we've been talking about.
I want the logistical details, the manufacture, what happens?
Yeah, but first I believe art is really a concept. It's a conceptual thing.
Yes.
It's the ideas. The rest, skill and because obviously if I'm painting, I'm alone on canvas and I'm doing that. But sometimes with these ideas, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to go to the Juakali guys and then first I pick things, go to my studio, develop samples, develop things, with ideas coming from all over, what we are just talking about, from language, from experiences, from what's happening. And then you put all these together into like a pot of some sort. And then then the rest is really manifestation, really. But again, as I'm working, I'm also writing music, writing poetry, then drawing ideas of fashion, and these, some people might not see some of this, but they guide me. So I easily can see like a fabric or pattern that I played a bit with mukeka and chikapu in my fashions. So they eventually just become. The other, of course, is which people take for granted, but maybe it's a personal thing. I also come from a hip-hop background.
Yeah, that's critical.
Yeah. So hip-hop has its aesthetic. But hip-hop is also very bold and very conscious. I mean, today hip-hop has taken on a different path, but hip-hop is also about sampling, but it's also about excellence. Excellence in presence, in delivery, in cadence. So these things are taken for granted, but when you actually
bring them all together,
yeah,
akasaka.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They influence that, the boldness, but also my ancestry. Okuluko omukeka.
To weave a mat.
Yeah. First of all, they have all these names. Chachi.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
The different kinds of mats.
I'm listening to you.
I cannot translate chachi.
Yeah, no,
Can someone translate?
No. I just want you to give other.
Kalanami.
Kalanami,
Yes.
And Dala?
Yeah. Do you know any other two? Yeah.
Okay.
Kalanami, chachi, those two examples. Yes.
So,
one is more fine, the other one is larger.
Some are fine, but they are like 8. I forget some of them. But our ancestors were also very keen on skill, on aesthetics, on the mat. They are also master mat makers because of the way they chose their colors. Yes. And most of these dyes were actually also from nature. Oh, yeah. So when you look at a well-made mat, you will know this is a well-made mat, and the patterns, how they are weaved together. So this thing is counterproductive. Even I was a few years ago in karaoke market, and I found these ladies making the sisal bags. But you could naturally see someone who is just learning and someone who is experienced.
The skill levels.
The skill, okay. And you know this one. Even leather. I like Nairobi also because you have this good leather culture. But you can tell a well-made, well-tailored bag. The threads, the finishing. So that, in a way, still informs. But then again, it takes us back to poetry. That how do you put words together that have a meaning, but also are almost seamless? They are like, if you can even say industrial, but still retain the emotion. I mean, it's like there is this oyinza okugamba zibuze nga gwe atazinoonyezza toyiyizza weegayaaza ozanya buzanyi zaala n'olowooza zineezaala zitya ng'ozalawa buli kaazi ng'embuzi ezira omuddo egy'entuuyo gikuswaza ng'ate tolina ffeeza toli mupaatiriffaaza tosolooza na musolo. So you can see the pattern of words, but they are almost like a drum pattern, But then again, each is a word on its own, but the vowels, how the Z's play, it's almost the same, with the word. So I guess
that is fantastic. Did any of those words have a relationship to the words you already know? Xenson just recited a poem right there on the spot in Luganda language. It just might relate to something you already know. Any word stood out? Don? Yes.
Almost the Z, X. Almost also, they have like a similar, almost like cadence.
The cadence, the sound, the emphasis, the consonants, and the vowels in there.
Well, I was just going to say that in Swahili, the za, it means of, depending on the context or the Ngeli. But what has related to me, I guess, because I'm a woman, is za, which means to birth.
Zala.
Yeah.
Oh,
za.
Very interesting. Because that's the same word in Luganda for giving birth. Yes, okuzala. That's the word. But then here, it's a game. There is okuzala, but there is zala. Zala.
There is also, and that's also interesting because there is okuzala, then there is zala. Zala meaning give birth, like they are ordering you to give birth. Okuzala is the act, but there's someone telling zala. Then there is Zala. Then Zala is the game. And then there are, of course, a couple of other. Zalawa. Then I can say
lingo.
Street lingo. Zalawo, actually, can also. So Zalawo means, I don't know how to.
We don't have to translate. That's the beauty of it.
But yeah, so, but then again, the same thing that I've just said. Like, I'm saying it because also I might be coming from a poetical or hip-hop background, but my grandmother, for instance, would, again, it's language. Oyinza ogamba zibuze nga gwe atazinoonyeza toyiyiza weegayaza ozannya buzannyi zaala n'olowooza zineezaala zineezaala zitya ng'ozaala wa buli kaazi ng'embuzi ezira omuddo egy'entuuyo gikuswaza ng'ate tolina ffeeza toli mupaatiriffaaza tosolooza n'amusolo nti oneezibika ezo bwongo bukaluzolo kubujjuza amagengere bwe mwekatankira mbalaba otagalaba kutongoza kuba obagulirayo tonto ku katono k'okazana zolo teweetantala keziri tolontoka ne zikuyita kulitalaba tebali kutaliza. So you can see now that can be like this sack here. You've seen the sack. The sack, the final work before you get to this room, in the room behind us here. So that sack is, we all see it's metal, but it's now more malleable. It becomes, in Uganda bagamba, we say, amanyi g'olujegere, gemanyi, okugonda kw'olujegere gwemanyi gaalo. The pliable, the flexibility of a chain is its power, is its inherent strength. So that work seems, I mean, it's metal, but it seems malleable, it seems soft. You have made it look like fabric. Yeah, like fabric. Yeah. So it's the same idea. Yeah, it's the same. It's those ideas that you play around with, and you know. So it just keep all these layers and genres just keep. I just weave through them. But it's also something I trained myself, but maybe also growing up as a kid, you grow, I mean, in school, mathematics, traditional music, choir. So all these things keep... They feed off of each other and into one another. And you grow up, you know, interfacing with football, music, especially traditional folk music at the National Theatre. And your kids, you just experiment. There's football, you go. There is music, traditional instruments, you go, you know. And these, but you have to, I think, in a way, also train yourself to just experiment with things. We are lucky. I mean, there are times when your mother does not allow you to cross the road, beatings and stuff. But today, I think many kids lose out on experimenting with stuff. I mean, like, you grow up in a chikomera, a perimeter wall around your home. Perimeter wall, apartments, you know, you grow up in an apartment and probably you go to boarding school. Maybe boarding school can help a bit, but so you don't experience or interface with many experiences. I went to boarding school, we would escape, you go to Nabugabo swimming, so I learned swimming by default because I went with my friends and I almost drowned and they left me, so I had to learn by default, you know, you have to learn, you know. And then we met a lady there who used to make, to make brew, or mwenge bigere tonto. So you learn that, you go there. Of course, you have friends who escape and to work on to New York, you know, like, you know, in school. So those experiences, again, I think, shape some of your thinkings, those childhood memories.
It looks like you're talking about the childhood, but you're also talking about class. You mentioned Juakali workers earlier on, and you're also talking about children today who are growing up very, very protected. You gave the image of a home that's surrounded by a perimeter wall, so the child is actually already restricted in what they can experience. The notion of class and how it comes into your work and how you yourself are traversing different classes in your making and in your life, that's interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, but I think art, and I don't know what art is, because art is something someone says that's art. But I think art or expression in a way is an emotional thing which every human has. Every human feels an emotion. And I think expressions transcend class, elite. But then again, what I call the Echikomera also has for a long time inspired my work. Because if you look at our ancestral homestead, it has the Tata, Jaja, family, you know, by
different.
Yeah, different. But then it has this Chikomera, this
a reed fence
around
around
the reed fence.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So it's not a new thing. Mm-hmm. But so the question then becomes, is it to protect the people within that, or to confine them, or to imprison them? So those are two scenarios that you can begin to build something around it. Is it to protect? So in terms also of organic and natural materials, you have then this reed that is essential in the construction, in especially African architect. And then you can be able to play with that notion of, you know. But of course then, which again is an inspiration, kids would go hunting, they would go with their grandmothers to the garden, you would go herding. And some of these things, we look at them as like...
That's from the past.
Yeah,
it's
from
no
the
longer
past.
relevant. Mm-hmm.
But actually also, if we come to look at the land, because we all know that Mother Nature, why it's called, you touching the land is medicine itself. That's why you find most people in the villages never really get sick. They don't grow fat because they are in touch with the... Yeah, so much as there was this reed, and you can create a story around it, the fence, but they were also free, or they had their moments to go out, even gaming, even fruit finding. What I don't remember the name they used. Okusaka. No, si kusaka. Okusaka is different. Yeah. But going out in a fene, all those things. Yeah.
So there's a tension around the fence, around the materials of a fence, and also some kind of ambiguity of its function, its role. With that fence conversation, I'd like to invite you to participate in this conversation some more. Does anybody have a question or comment, or from any point? We'll start with you here in the middle. Thank you. Please give your name and, yes, the gentleman. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Obi. I didn't know much about your work before seeing it, but I wanted you to talk about the one with the heads, because it seems quite different to the others, which have the same materiality and colors, but that seems quite different. So I'd be interested to hear you speak about that.
Yeah, again, it's a metaphorical work, but it starts from the sigiri, which is called a jiko.
Jiko here.
And the use of the jiko really is a starting point, like to find, for especially the average, especially Ugandan, to find an entry point into this work. But
In what way is it an entry point?
because everyone knows what the sigiri is, what the jiko is, and what it does. Already they know it cooks food, but there are many layers to that work, even before it came. But maybe I can, I don't want to talk about the work. Maybe I could first ask what you think about it. What does it tell you? Before I can even tell you what the work is about.
I don't know. To me, the first impression I got was just the different characters. Like, immediately you just recognize them as faces. Different parts of the faces were covered. But I think there was kind of putting them together was interesting because there's so many and they kind of played off each other. So you could just keep looking at the different faces and thinking about what they could represent. So I think something about the unity, because they're all made from the same base, but there are different modifications to each of them, which gave them a special character. So there's something about community and togetherness and diversity in that. And also because the materiality of it as well, it was all metallic, it wasn't colorful like the other work, but the form of it was interesting and very sculptural, so I appreciated that.
Can I add just a quick follow-up? Why did you cover the eyes or the nose, but the mouth are always left free? Like in one, you literally scrub the whole face, but the mouth is always uncovered.
Yeah, there is always, there is this image, and I'm sure everywhere, but again, that work again echoes the other work. Where
But Sigiri echoes which one?
With the
Mukeka. The Toninyira, the assemblage of
yes.
jikos.
Yeah, so okay. There is an image. I don't know if you can draw this image. When you make sigiri, because it's tiny, people in Uganda we call it akasigiri.
A small sigiri is the car implies
the
small.
The small jiko.
The small jiko.
But when you're making the sigiri, there are many ways of making sigiri. There is powering paraffin.
Oh, you mean lighting it?
Lighting it.
To use it.
To use it. Mm-hmm. So first you put charcoal. So they put charcoal, and there are certain sticks that light first. You can put them under, or pieces of paper, or you can actually power paraffin and make
light a match.
Mm-hmm. But I think the one that causes more is the sticks. Those, I forget the name of the sticks.
I think they're from the pine tree.
Yeah, something like that.
They burn really fast. Yeah. Okay.
So that image, the fire becomes so hot before you even put anything. It has to first. You have to
wait for the charcoal to actually catch the fire.
Yeah, and then that image is a very crazy, very bizarre image. I don't know if you see what I mean. Have you been in because if you haven't been in interface with that kasig, with just the fire before you put anything.
A cigarette before.
Yeah.
No.
So it becomes a bit harder. But so that image eventually became part of the lingo kasigiri. So people call it kasigiri. Yes. So they say.
Martha, you want to add to the conversation after?
Yeah. So they say kasigiri. And by doing that, they pick that image and relate it to someone who, anxiety, but also someone who is too pushy. Like someone who is like your boss who demands excellence and he demands work to be delivered on time, even before time. Poster, yeah. Exactly, like pressure cooker. Yeah.
That's why he asked.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. So pressure cooker is a very good expression. The pressure cooker. I remember my mom, pressure cookers, many times they used to go up the ceiling. You know, it would, like 7 of them actually. I had 3 before university, yeah. So they would, so that image, I don't know how to create it or to say it, but so the head itself, I will go brief. The head itself is a compressor of the refrigerator. So again, that plays with compression, with pressure. But it's also the brain of the refrigerator, the
power
engine. Yeah, the energy. So, so if you relate to what kasigili means in Luganda,
the idiom now.
The idiom kasigili, and that figure, then you'll totally get it. But it's covered because then if there are many, I call them basigiri, so it becomes a community, it's a group. It's almost like a tribe. The covering, I call it blindfold the noise. Blindfold the noise is, it also has a couple of layers, but maybe I'll talk about 2 because of time. One of them is, to a greater extent today, people don't consult their subconscious. We are just getting things we are looking and copying, but yet, and also I think even in the Bible, or say these sayings are there, that the world is within us. So when you close, it's like meditation, you know, like you close and look within you, consult your subconscious. Then things will, also as a creative, you will begin to see things, maybe new creations or maybe new thinkings, new thoughts, because you consult your subconscious. That means you cover everything on earth, or what your eyes could see, so that you can draw from yourself, draw from your subconscious. It's basically what it means. But the other is to also close the noise. So blindfolding the noise is also a multi-layer, blindfold the noise, which don't listen to what people say, because people say anything, even what they don't know, they fear what they, you know, so when you blindfold, it means you're just listening to yourself. And I think it's very important, especially now with social media and everything, noise all over the place. You need time to contemplate, to meditate, and listen to yourself. Who am I? What do I want to say? Why, you know, it's simple like that, actually. Who am I? What is it that I want to say? And when you listen to yourself, because the world has taught us to think they are gatekeepers, they are people controlling our lives, you know, politicians. So we just flow with, you know, whatever is thrown up, images, you know. But if you listen to yourself, you will do that. And there are people who even don't do anything, but they become custodians of information and of knowledge, critics. And they are talking about these things they don't even understand. They don't know where you come from. They don't know your cultural background, but they are there to say, you know, that painting, you know, like, we know these things, you know, like, so you need to, so it's both good and bad. It's a yin and yang, that sculpture. So the other is really hairstyle, which, again, there are all these layers, especially in Kampala. A Rasta man might be checked 10 times because he has this hairstyle. And a thug in a suit and a briefcase will be allowed in. And he will be the thug, the thief, the robber, but because so really it's just playing around with different narratives, people having different expressions, different feelings. We all can't techuomera matama abiri.
No 2 people can test something in the same way.
So yeah, the rest is a long thing to, if I go into. Yeah,
that can be a conversation over coffee.
Yeah, because later. Again, so I was playing with it, but I also wanted to make, I also do a bit of film, experimental film. So these are characters that I was also developing for a stop motion. about, again, the Kasigiri, about these people who are within us, sometimes abambalunji, like if you owe me money, if I lend you money in a peaceful way, and then I have to come for it, 1, 2, 3 years, you're not paying me, so there is that scenario. In Uganda, we say, Owolo tudde obanjo yimiridde. What does it?
Martha? I will throw the translation to the audience.
So that you give the money when seated and then you have to stand up when asking for it.
Yeah, but in Uganda, it's multiple layered. There are many layers to it. English, I think, is a poor language. Weak? No, it's a serious thing. It's a weak language because it's also an amalgamation of different things from all over the place.
It reminds me of the 1962 Makerere conference, writers' conference. Yeah. Thinking, what is an African writer going to be post-independence? It seems to me we are still discussing this question of language and what the artist or the writer is going to be.
Myself, I think in Uganda, because it's what I understand, I can draw from many years of my ancestral history, and it's what I present to the common memory of humanity. And it's simple like that. And I think we also sometimes talk about it.
What's being very humble.
Our contribution. No.
Let's see if somebody has another question for you. Yes, okay, we'll have, she had her hand up earlier and then Achayo after.
I just wanted to go back to the concept of za, especially after you had explained more about it, in the sense of, in your language, it could also mean to be commanded to birth. So from an artistic perspective, do you also relate that in the sense of there's always demand for creation, whether from the public or from people, or also within yourself, there's always demand or command to birth, to create. What do you think about that?
Don wants to attempt to answer, or you wanted to add to that question? Okay. Please.
I guess just thinking about that, as they said, that imperative to create, I think to me what I'd like to add to that is also I've been to your studio a lot of times, and there's no shortage of work. You may not be exhibiting every single month, every single year, but you make quite a bit of work, and so there's this sense of accumulation. I mean, this exhibition has work that you made in the past few months, but then a piece such as Basigiri is something you've been working on for a while. So I guess just in a follow-up to that, if you could also speak to that sense of time and accumulation and why it is that you make a point of staying and sitting with work in your studio for quite some time before you make a decision about how it goes into the world or where it's going to be shown.
Yeah, so again, it takes us back to look into yourself, listen to yourself. What do you want to say? It's like writing in a diary, really. Can someone tell you to write in your diary? No. Because it's your diary, it's up to you to say, today I did this, or tomorrow I want to do this, and So no one can force you to do things, or to paint, or this is what we want. It's up to you. What do I want to say? You look into yourself. How do I want to say it? Do I use film? Do I use fashion? Do I use poetry? If I'm a painter, okay, do I want to make a painting? And at your will, you will produce it. It's simple like that. Of course, sometimes so many things are happening. So why I keep working is because there is a lot to say, really. There is just a lot, especially for creatives. There's just too much stuff around us, but also within us. Emotionally, there is, of course, this debate, especially in Uganda. We call it, what do they call it? Mental health. it starts in the mind. People are thinking too much, there is just too much stuff in the mind that maybe they don't know how to bring it out. So some find themselves killing themselves there is just too much. And I don't think should be anyone dictating on what you should be doing. So I know there are gatekeepers, but also I know that as an artist, your role is to create culture, to create art, because 100 years from today, history will always come back and say, okay, so in Kenya, what was happening in 2024, in 2023, in 2000? What were they doing? Who were the artists? What were they doing in that moment? In fact, there was a part of this is even interesting. There is a story with Sana. When we went to Scotland for Luware and the boat.
Sana Gateja is a Ugandan artist as well, and he works on monumental scale too.
Yeah.
But you had a collaborative work.
So I started to ask this question. Of course, we visited museums. So there is this the time of Baroque, the Baroque period in European history. So I'm thinking, so in Baroque, with all this architecture, with the art, with the ornamentation, what happened in Africa during the Baroque in Europe? Can anyone tell us what happened, that history? What was happening? Because there was the Baroque, it's well recorded. What was happening in Africa during Baroque in Europe? These are the questions we need to ask. And we still need to ask. So 100 years from now, of course today, and we talked about it, there is M-Pesa. So maybe 100 years, there was this Kenyan who found M-Pesa. And I think that's critical because he's not just being a part, or we shouldn't just be a part, but we should be contributors to that memory. And we can only create or conserve that memory by creating as artists. I mean, why should we know about the pyramids? It's because they are built in that moment, BC something, and we see them, the hieroglyphics, all these mummies, So as artists, the onus is on us to keep creating. It doesn't matter if you become rich or if you make money, As an artist, there is no other way out. You either create or die, So, and I think that's why I just keep, but also looking at concepts that not necessarily impact, but are part of your community. Basically it's like documenting or mirroring your community, what is happening at that moment in time. Of course, there are conversations of the global conversations. Today, of course, there is the decolonization of the mind, decolonization of museums, also even decolonization of art as we know it, But what is art anyway? And I asked earlier. So these are challenges that as artists, as musicians, as creators, filmmakers that we need. And also, what is because sometimes we hide behind internationalism, globalization. But where does it come from? Something must have a root. It must come from somewhere. It just can't come from space. You see me, I'm an international artist. I get my ideas. If I'm Kenyan, I've born in Kenya, lived in Kenya for 40 years. I mean, it's good to say, you see my paintings, my work, but we need to, for me at least, I need to know where I'm coming from, and that guides what I contribute to that common memory.
So there's a rootedness in one's history and location that you draw on, and so that informs the accumulation that Don was asking about, and the imperative to create that comes from inside.
And it doesn't disregard traditions and cultures are mobile. You know, they keep moving and changing. Language also keeps changing. You know, so and to go back a bit, you talked of the conference. I mean, look at Things Fall Apart. Even today, the essence of that novel. But that novel is centered in
That's Chinua Achebe.
Yeah, Chinua Achebe. Okot Bitek, Songs of Lawino. They are situated in that little village in the north. But its relevance and its reach, these are...
Okonkwo and
yes.
and Lawino and Okol
yes, but they reached,
characters.
they are actually even, the book actually was also translated in Chinese.
Okay, so the reach of language.
The reach of language, yeah. So I think it's very important to not be escapists, to hide behind facades of certain isms or certain layers of what's happening, like, you know. So I think as creatives, we need to begin to, but again, it comes back to you. Who am I? What do I want to say?
And the questions you're asking.
And so
okay. Achayo, let's hear your question, please.
Yeah, I mean, some of your work is quite disturbing. I think immediately on entry to the gallery, there's a piece that's out on the display, and then parts of it are, I think, with a sack. You know, I see references almost of dystopia, of Armageddon, even the heads. I mean, for me, I see what I'm seeing from them. Part of my first interpretation was, are you boiling heads? You know, brains, you know? Yes. And also the grotesque nature, you know, of those heads that, so I'm just looking at that. Then perhaps the second one could be more thrown to the curator. I mean, why he has done, I mean, his selection of the works to show that there is the other pieces that are more psychedelic, you know. Of course, this is without me still understanding their interpretation very well, but visually, as they're represented, there is all this play with color, yes, and of course, even the monumental piece, but deep in, once one gets to navigate the gallery, you find all this heaviness. So as you're doing this, first, what are you thinking? Usually what's going on in your mind? And then do you take on the nature, does the emotion of the protagonist that you're representing in the works, how does that even affect you as a person? You reference mental health sometimes. And I can imagine when you're playing these roles in society where you're questioning, sometimes you can't help but step into the shoes, of whoever, whatever conversation you're trying to really force the world to deal and delve with. So also, how do you deal with that? Yeah.
Producing this work, first of all, is the therapy. But I'm also, like I said, I come from a hip-hop background where social consciousness is part of the fabric, the aesthetic of hip-hop, what we call real hip-hop. But also, a couple of years I started to question this whole thing. In Uganda, we call it Ubuntu Bulamu.
It's the concept of Ubuntu that I guess we most associate with Southern Africa. Humanity.
Essence of humanity. So and I've been putting it all over the place, but I also have this clothing that is coming out. I mean, I've used it a bit, but Ubuntu Bulambwadawa.
Where did this humanity go?
Where did the humanity go? Because everyone seems to be engrossed in, first of all, the capitalistic sentimentality, about money grab. I mean, you have the world's billionaire feeding Africa for 10 years. One guy, Walmart itself, the income, what do you call it? The profit margin is 3 times the annual budget of Uganda. Walmart alone. You know?
Is that the darkness you're referring to in some of the work?
And then, of course, the status quo, the world today, the state of the world. If you South Sudan, you saw what happened. Sudan itself, what has been happening between the two. Then, of course, Ukraine, what's happening. Gaza, what's happening. In Uganda, we had Rwenzururu, Southwest Uganda, especially, and Omumbere, and how, you know, so all these layers, and it's not just that, but on average, when you look at Africans are happy people, and maybe they take in all these things, but the state of affairs is not very bright. I mean, especially in Uganda today, people don't seem to see the future, you know, like they're not positive. I mean, they live daily. And obviously, it's not that I'm affected, but I think it's also, but I'm appalled. That's why I'm asking, omuntu bulamu bwaddawa. Omuntu omulamu notta muntu munno. Lwaki otta muntu munno? Totta muntu munno. You know, n'otamanya nti sekiriba kya ttaka, teri atali kyambala. Channaku chenyamiza. Lwaki otta muntu munno? So it's yeah. So it's
that's for the rest of the group.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, there was a very quick interlude of a poem there in Luganda once again. And the question, I guess the overall question he's asking is, why are we killing each other? Where is our humanity?
Yeah,
Am I right?
But it's not even literal. But the state of affairs demands that, for instance, in Uganda today, most young people, if you talk about anything, politics, you are arrested and incarcerated. It's simple like that. So there is no room for self-expression, you know? So as an artist, I think it's also my role to stand into this position, to relay the condition of what's happening, because I have a voice as an artist. Obviously, it's also poetic. Poetic in a sense that the powers that be might not easily understand it. But with time, it's also, I'm also documenting that. So yeah, so the moment eventually the codes can be broken, it doesn't matter when, but those codes will be broken. Exactly. And that's the role of the artist, really, I think, to document today for posterity. It doesn't matter. Otherwise, I mean, if like Ugandan music today, 98% of the music is love, dance. But when you actually come down and look under the carpet,
the lyrics,
it's not what is happening. There is a kind of self-sabotage, self-censorship, and blatant lie. You know, because, of course, people are scared. I think the truth eventually sets you free. And like you said, if I can tell the truth, I think I'm free. I'm devoid of the stress of exactly. And I think that's a therapy of some sort. Yeah, for myself, but also for my generation, for the young people that don't have this voice. Okay. And for me, I also find it a bit sad that, because an artist is a powerful tool. Probably you've all seen Bobby Wine. He's a musician, the Ugandan politician. Because he used his voice as a musician, he became a powerful force, a powerful tool. And I think artists should. I mean, we've seen also artists doing this, you know. So, and I think we need to go on, to continue, yeah.
So let's see what Don Handa has to say about the curating and the selection of works.
I think maybe what I'll say is rather than say which works, maybe I'll say why this artist. I think I maybe met Xenson in 2018 or 2019. And I've been, because of my work, I've had the opportunity to go to Kampala a few times, and whenever I have the chance, I visit Xenson, we sit in the studio, and we talk. And so the last time I was in the studio last year, and I was actually with Martha, and we stopped and we said, why not do a show? And Xenson said yes, so, thank you for saying yes. But I think the thing for me, what I enjoy about this show and about Xenson's work in general, I think it's quite accessible. The images, just the choices of the materials, the objects, the things that we know. The sigiri, the thing we're talking about, is not something that's foreign, something that's very familiar. The use of the colors that are these very colorful, bright, appealing, they sort of invite you in. I think the work gives an opportunity for something rather playful, rather light-hearted, to also sit side by side with things that are a bit more sinister, a bit more problematic. And I think that for me is what's interesting about the work. When you have a giant stack that's stuffed with charcoal, but then instead of charcoal, you have black dolls that are modeled on a certain shape of a kind of doll that children make. So there's all these there's these layers. I mean, you talked a lot about layers, but there are these things that seem almost benign, but they connect to a lot of things in kind of wider communities and societies. And if you're from those communities, then, the meanings are immediately obvious to you. But even if you aren't, they allow you to enter the work and connect it both to what you're looking at, but also to, I guess, what is the larger structure that they're part of. So my answer would be, that is why I wanted to do an exhibition with Xenson as an artist. And, I hope this show gives whoever comes into the space a sense of that and a sense of how Xenson's work works.
Thank you. We have the last question. Please tell us your name, and that will be...
So mine isn't really a question. I'm a collector of his works. Okay, the name is Barbara Barungi, member of Contemporary Art Society of Uganda, founder member. Collect his works. Amused by the ending point on the sack of charcoal and the dolls, because a child. Did your mother give you the other name? Because he lit me, him, and Don.
Which is him? Achayo?
Yes.
Okay.
And Don. Stood by that, looked at it, and I think the Uganda title for the piece of work is Ebireria or whatever.
Ebireria.
Yes, okay? So he called his mother to find out what's the same name in the local language, his local language. And then we focused on the dolls, and that's where it became a bit sinister. But then I remember saying to them that as a collector of your works, a lot of your work is very deep. There is a political and social consciousness. And I'm really glad that you've pushed him to actually admit it, because normally he doesn't like talking about his work. So it's the depth of that political, social...
But I haven't talked about it.
You've mentioned it. The fact that you've mentioned it, and I really think that is why his voice is important. And I'd like to encourage all of you to do a little more digging into his works, and also encourage you to collect his works, because it's deep, okay? I mean, it gives us a voice, and it's applicable. I'm a Ugandan that lives in Nigeria, okay? And that spends a lot of time in Kenya. I'm glad to see Shabu Mwangi, another one who does a lot of work that is very socially conscious. So the more... Can we see who you want? He's another like Xenson who doesn't like people. So the more we have of you giving a voice, the better. So kudos to the show, kudos to the curator and the team. And then very pleased to finally find a Ugandan art historian. I was told there were none. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for being here and loving Xenson's work. We love his work.
Hi. It's just a yes or no question. It can be answered by any of you. Before you put out work, do you have to justify it to the government? Are you allowed to put out political work out without any discrimination? Or is there, I'm half Cuban, so there is no way you can put out a piece of writing, article, a work, or film of any kind without the official government's approval first. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Xenson?
Yeah, obviously, with art, it's still a virgin area, and conceptual art, they don't really understand it. I mean, most politicians don't really understand it, but recently, if you're going to stage a play, you need to give a script, a synopsis. Albums, I think they are trying music albums, they are trying to, I think through the music, there is a Uganda Music Association, so you give lyrics and wherever, but mainly productions, theatrical, you have to give a synopsis of your play.
To whom?
And a
to
script.
Which agency?
I think UCCE, Uganda Communications Commission. And yeah, I mean, it's there, but there are also people policing. I mean, like we used to organize the poetry. I used to organize poetry nights, and there would be secret agents from the, to know what are these young people talking about. Yeah, so that story is there, and it's become intense now. If they hear you talking, and it's present. Sometimes it's not evident, but it's omnipresent.
My question is just simple. Whenever I meet influential people, I usually have one question to ask. Have you ever had a fall in your career path? And if so, how did you come up from it? Because I usually have a challenge, and sometimes I am stuck and don't know how to pick up. Maybe I can learn a thing from that.
Yeah, so falls are part of life, but also if you know your role on earth, we are not here for many years, we are here for at most maybe 100 years. So if you know what you want to do in those 100 years, I don't think there will be room. You fall and stand up and move, fall and stand up, because life is laced with challenges. So we have to try as much as possible to just keep, in fact, the word is keep moving. Yeah, I wanted to give you hope, but I think the better thing is to know what you want and just know that on earth you have very, very limited time, and yet you need to achieve it, or within that time you need, so whenever you fall, you just keep moving. Especially for an artist, you guys, life of an artist is a sacrifice. Forget about the money. I know people talk about the money, and people are making paintings to make money, but life of an artist is a sacrifice. And maybe I can be real now. Personally, I had a chance to become an engineer. I was among the top 5 in the country, engineering, physics, chemistry, mathematics. But I gave that up all because I thought there is nothing I'm going to add to engineering. The only thing I can add to humanity, to the memory of humanity, is my creation, or the emotions that I add. So you imagine an African parent with a kid at university with engineering. You've reached heaven, orgasm of the highest order, but you give it up, and everyone is like, Margaret, your son has lost it. Why is he wasting his grades? Those things, he's wasted his grades because you're passing and you're the best in the country. So it's a sacrifice, because if you don't, no one will do it. Especially if you're an artist. If you don't do art, no one is going to do it. If you're chosen to be an artist and you have talent in that, you better wake up, forget about getting rich, and just create art. Obviously, money will come. In some way or another, money will come. But if money is your major, you rather go and do something else. I mean, it's like The traditional dances that we make today, you think those guys made money out of it? In fact, we had a system, our ancestors had a system that the creatives were isolated and given special space so that they are not distracted about surviving, about earning a living. You know, why? Because they knew these are important people. You know, these are important people within society. Forget about governments of today. Forget about what they call, the British call it, because I mean, the British and the French, especially the British, are some of the worst enemies of African culture, if you look at colonialism, because they made sure that they make our indigenous expressions and our art forms, they demonize them, you know? So I know we still, these elements of Western art come in, but they are not what it is. We are also trying to find a new formation of what African art could be, or today, what is African art? So,
pull herself up when she gets a challenge.
I feel so happy to be giving the last question. First of all, I must say that I'm so honored, Xenson, to listen to you. And I'm so also grateful to the team at Nikkei for making this happen. You spoke about so many things that I knew as a Ugandan, but never made sense. And now you're kind of unfolding them through riddles, through proverbs, and all these kind of things. And my question to you, because as you're talking, sometimes lines were escaping your memory. Sometimes when you're talking about the mat, which I'm very, very interested in, about like the different types of the mat and the formations, the names, the forms, the styles, and all that was escaping you. My question to you is, who is the custodian of this knowledge right now? Where can we find these riddles, these proverbs? Are they in a place we can find us as, you know, young creatives, young art historians who are trying to forge a life now? Because I also find so much inspiration from folklore. As you know, I run Njabala Foundation, and Njabala is a folklore told in Uganda. So I'm constantly interested in, you know, uncovering stories and how they can help us shape the now. But I'm always afraid that these stories are running out, and more our children are more on games, on screens, and they don't have the chance to even experience the doll that you're showing in the installations. So who is the custodian of this information, and how can we be intentional about keeping it safe for our posterity, as you said earlier? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Our work should engage our community, because our community are the connoisseurs of the future of posterity. So this question shouldn't be coming from Martha, because we all know that the custodians of our what? Of these stories, custodians of idioms, of folklore, are the people, are the community. If you look at Baksimba dance, everywhere within Buganda, they know about Baksimba, the story of Kintu. So our people, the community, are the connoisseurs. They are the custodians of this knowledge, of these stories, of these poems, of these dances. 800 years ago, they are the ones that will push this in the future. What you've created, if it's outside of the community, it means you're living in a bubble. But if you work within the community, it's those people, the grandfather or the grandmother will tell this story to the daughter. The daughter will tell the story to their daughter. The daughter will tell the story to the daughter. So if you work in a bubble, which is more of a Western thing, because most of African knowledge expressions are passed on word of mouth. They are passed on within families, within clans, within tribes. The answer is simple, really. So if you want, and of course I have a problem with the Njabala as a story, but because I feel it's the most eloquent, most pertinent form of empowerment, of female empowerment. So, but I will leave that at that. But what I'm saying is, these stories are in the villages. Of course, we talked about art as being elitist, meaning it's in galleries. Of course, sometimes we fall victim, but also I try, especially myself, as much as possible to work within public space, within communities, because these are the people that are going to put. In fact, I was going to propose we find a way of putting this exhibition somewhere within. I know the videos help. But we need to do more. It's a challenge also for institutions like Inkai, Makerere University, galleries, to engage the community. Those that come are well and good, but we need more so that we engage with them, because these are the people who are going to push it into the future. Like I said, we are not here 100 years, but the people that have seen this will tell someone about it. They will tell someone about it. And that story will go on and on. But if we work in bubbles, you're in your studio and you work your little things, yes, you might be a billionaire, but the world has a million billionaires, but you're an artist. So and it's a debate we always have, that if I'm an artist, I'm trying to be a billionaire. It's not bad to be a billionaire, and we will be billionaires, but that's not your essence. It's not your primary goal. Your primary goal is to
transcend.
Asante sana.
Thank you so much, Xenson. Thank you for sharing your work. Thank you all for participating in the conversation, and thank you, G and Don and the rest of the staff in Nikai who have given us the space and the opportunity to share our ideas, and Xenson to share his position and his work. Thank you.